Here, one of the Western newspapers, this time Politico magazine, spread the fake news that Donald Trump convinced Viktor Orban and that Hungary is going to change its position regarding Ukraine's accession to the European Union. A few days ago, Bloomberg news agency, which claims to be credible, wrote the same thing, and they even made up the story that Donald Trump called Viktor Orban and managed to convince him over the phone.
Well, this phone conversation, of course, never actually happened. What happened is, as everyone knows, that during the famous visit to the White House, President Zelensky, who was present, and the President of the European Commission tried to convince the President of the United States to call the Hungarian Prime Minister and put pressure on him regarding Ukraine's European Union membership. You see, the Ukrainian strategy, the way they want to move forward in the European integration process has always been that they never approached us directly with bilateral issues. Their primary concern was not to have a direct dialogue with us, but rather, if there was some kind of deadlock, they would call Brussels first. And they would ask Brussels to put pressure on the Hungarian government to finally give up its resistance. If that didn't work, then under the Biden administration, they would call Washington so that through their local representatives here, they could send a message to the Hungarian government that this is over now. Everyone who stands in their way is put on a sanctions list. Economic, political, and so on. Sanctions would follow, and the Ukrainians thought that the time had come to test whether this strategy would work under the new Trump administration as well. And clearly it doesn't work. No matter how hard the European mainstream media tries. And Trump and his team won this election. They won this political battle. They defeated their political opponents. Now, I think the Commission and Brussels are making a huge mistake if they put themselves in the role of Trump's political opponents. Trump already has serious reservations about international organizations, but if the European Union becomes not just another international organization that Trump has issues with, but actually his political opponent, then naturally Trump will want to defeat this political opponent as well. The European Commission, Brussels, is more than happy to take on the role of welcoming those who have suffered political defeat in America. Let's continue to fund those programs that Trump no longer wants to finance. Trump does not want to finance them. Trump can only see this as Brussels stepping into the role of his political opponent, the one he fought and defeated in America. This is a complete misunderstanding of the situation. It is completely, absolutely clear to me that obviously the Ukrainians know exactly what and why they are bombing. They know exactly where this pipeline comes from, and they know exactly where this pipeline leads. They also know what this means for the Russian energy sector. They know exactly what percentage of Russian energy revenues come from the energy carriers transported through the Druzhba oil pipeline. They know exactly that this will not bring the Russian energy sector to its knees. They also know exactly that this will harm Hungary and Slovakia. So it's not that hard to put the pieces of the puzzle together. By the way, this also fits into the Ukrainian negotiation strategy. You see, the always Ukrainian government, but this is not a recent characteristic. This has always been the case with Ukraine. It has always spoken the language of power and only understood the language of power. So everything the Ukrainians are doing in this regard can be understood in the context of political pressure to act in its own interest. What I find truly outrageous is that the European Commission in this matter has taken the side of a third country instead of a member state. And if there is an institution that I, as a member state, have established to serve my interests, and this institution not only fails to help, but actually takes the side of a third country that threatens my fundamental national interests, then I have to say that there is a fundamental problem with the functioning of European institutions. And I'll go even further, because the European Commission promised us the opposite at the beginning of the year when we agreed to the latest sanctions package, and a written statement was made at that time. And this written statement said that the European Commission considers the security of energy supply for the member states to be a matter of European significance and will act accordingly. If this is a matter of European significance, then I ask, where is the Commission that in such a case would act in the interest of a member state? I think that a political decision was made at the highest level between the President of the Commission, the leader of the People's Party, and President Zelensky, that Ukraine must be brought into the European Union as soon as possible. You know, this 2030 target date has also been mentioned by President von der Leyen and the Commissioner responsible for enlargement. But they always add that, of course, it could happen earlier if, in fact,
Well, after all, if Ukraine were truly developing at such a pace and transforming its judicial system, its legislation and everything else so quickly, then perhaps they could join as soon as tomorrow.
This undermines the credibility of the entire enlargement process. So today there are very few people left in Brussels or in the other candidate countries, including the Western Balkans, who would say that this is truly an objective, merit-based process. I don't think anyone in Brussels or among the member states' leaders believes that anymore. They think that...
Here is the iconic photo I already mentioned. Is there any aftermath of this in Brussels, among the EU institutions, among the bureaucrats, that last Monday they had to go out and take such a position in the White House, in the American president's office?
Yes, absolutely. So when someone looks at this photo, you know, I've thought a lot about what the point is, what the purpose is of President Trump calling these leaders to the White House and then seating them in chairs that are 2 sizes too low and scolding them like kindergartners after a botched afternoon activity. So really, what is the point of all this?
You'd think they wanted themselves, and Trump invited them over. In reality, they went out of their way to be there, and out of politeness, Rubin said, "Sure, it's fine, they're coming. What's the point?"
Yes, but it happened a lot. And then I realized that in American political communication, it's all about these images. So I think what happened is that the American president invited these people over and then publicly humiliated them there. That's all that happened. That's it. That's all that happened. Now, obviously, for the European political elite, this requires a lot of damage control because somehow they have to explain to the European public that this is not actually what happened. And there were serious after effects in that both the Commission and the member states put a lot of effort into explaining what the purpose of their visit was. And they came up with various explanations about what kind of agreement was reached regarding American security guarantees, about which we now know that no such agreement was actually made. To be precise, the development of the agreement is currently underway. A decision was made that the sanctions will remain on the table, and then...
This is a recent news item. Let's talk about it for a minute. This is the issue from yesterday, which appeared in the press, with the message that Hungary is suing the Union so that the frozen Russian assets won't end up with the Ukrainians, because apparently we begrudge even this money to Ukraine and to a country at war. What exactly is the main point here?
The main point here is that decisions related to the European Peace Facility can only be made unanimously. And in the European Peace Facility, Hungary has previously fought hard to secure decisions that, regardless of what kind of support is given to Ukraine through the peace facility, whether military or non-military support, through the peace facility, which is an Orwellian term, because what is called a peace facility actually serves for purchasing weapons. So we want to promote peace through weapons. So the European Peace Facility means military support, whether it involves equipment capable of taking lives or not. This is military support. That's why we call it the peace facility in Brussels. But the decisions of the peace facility are made unanimously. We fought for and achieved that we do not have to contribute to the military support provided to Ukraine. So if a decision is made to raise the upper limit of the peace facility by a certain amount, which means additional contributions from member states, we do not have to contribute to these payments. And the Council interpreted this decision to mean that if we do not have to contribute financially to these decisions, then it also means that we do not have to vote on these matters either. In other words, these decisions can be made while bypassing Hungary. This goes against both the letter and the spirit of the treaties.